There's a few of the members of the campaign to stop killer robots here in Geneva this week because Professor Christof Heyns is delivering his report on lethal autonomous robotic weapons, and that is being presented at the Human Rights Council, which basically commissioned it this week. So we'll have the first ever debate on the subject in the Human Rights Council. We want to do a lot of outreach today to governments and media and civil society, as well as to UN people. And the first meeting that we have scheduled is with the United Nations Office of Disarmament Affairs, which is the ODA. ODA take care of disarmament within the United Nations.
We want a broad international discussion of the issue, and we want to bring as many different countries and parties together as possible.
We find it difficult to believe that these weapons would ever be able to meet the requirements of international humanitarian law. We think that they simply would pose excessive dangers to civilians because they would not be able to meet the requirements of international humanitarian law.
We have a press conference scheduled with the Association of UN Correspondents. They have a special room for their members here, who are all of the Geneva-based journalists who cover the United Nations. We have got Steve Goose and Peter Asaro are going to brief them about the campaign, why the NGOs have come together, why we're concerned about what we call fully autonomous weapons, what the Heyns report calls lethal autonomous robotic weapons.
There's a lot of interest, I think, in the public and in the media about, killer robots, obviously.
I think we're getting a great response compared to other issues. This has really kicked off. There's a lot of attention. People seem to be wanting to get involved. Different agencies of the UN seem to be interested, and a lot of governments are very open to discussing this now.
The final thing that we're doing here in Geneva today is a side event at the Human Rights Council, and those are events that are open to diplomats, diplomatic representatives, government representatives who are based here because they work in the Conference on disarmament issues, or because they work in the Human Rights Council on human rights issues. Sometimes it's the same person who does both.
We are very supportive of the recommendations in that report. And for us, the key one is a call for a moratorium on these weapons. Now, a moratorium, of course, falls short of a permanent and comprehensive prohibition, which is what our campaign is calling for. We see the moratorium as a step toward, should be seen as a step toward a permanent prohibition.
It was a great turnout. The room was almost packed. Some international organizations were there and a lot of other NGOs, of course. It was a really good discussion. Lots of questions on how this will work, how to negotiate a ban, what do you want to do with this issue, which is really a sign that people are getting interested and ready to think about it.
We had 26 different countries send their delegates, and they listened to our presentation, but they'd also read our reports, and they were pretty well informed of the issue. We were able to give them some clarity on some of the more technical aspects of the issue, and I think there's a broad base of interest. The question is just really how to proceed and which countries are going to step forward and bring these issues to larger venues and forums and get action on this issue.
And then we will be hearing the delivery of the report. We're excited about the content of it. The big question, though, is how a government's going to react to this, because after it is delivered, they will have this interactive dialogue where states get 2 minutes maximum to present their views on the report and on the issue.
With lethal autonomous robotics, there's a possibility of dealing with something in an anticipatory manner. And I think that's important because the right to life deals with accountability if life is lost, but there's also the prevention component. And I think this is an issue that should be looked at. And as you know, in my report, I then really call for the international community to have a pause and to consider really the implications of what this may eventually entail. I think the reason why one should act now is because the possible introduction of lethal autonomous robots is really a fundamental shift. So we've had over the years development with weapons and the warriors using the weapons then, and these weapons becoming more powerful, in some cases more targeted. But the shift here is really that the weapon becomes the warrior. And there's no longer that distance and that, or actually that interaction between the human beings and other human beings, but the weapons themselves. there's a conflation of these. And I think before that happens, we need to consider it very carefully. Once it's done, there are all kinds of interests, military interests, industrial interests, and it's very difficult once that has happened really to turn back the clock.
This is the first time that we've engaged with diplomatic representatives and the first time that we've really kind of gotten down to the substance and started talking through the hard questions with the media and with others.
I think civil society plays a role in alerting society in general to issues, and I think this is happening here as well. And sometimes the case is stated very strongly and so forth, but I think that's all part of the process of drawing attention that something important is happening.
Now we need some governments to step up and talk about this issue and raise concerns. And once governments start acknowledging it, we can start sort of planning on how to move forward and how to start a process for negotiating a ban.